Getting started with Facebook ads. So Facebook ads, most anyone here is probably knows what they are in terms of Facebook ads. But when I reference Facebook ads, I'm also talking automatically about Instagram or any of the other platforms that what is now known as Meta owns. They all run their ads from the same advertising platform, regardless of whether you're looking at Instagram or Facebook. All of this is going to come from the Facebook Ads Manager. So that's the context of this. Facebook ads are typically fantastic for in a B2B, B2C context, but always expected to be just that little bit more expensive in a B2B context. That's pretty standard across all of the platforms. I would recommend allowing machine learning to do some of the work for you if you're low on data and or iOS 14 impact. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail. But machine learning or AI or whatever you want to call it, but giving Facebook less information right now typically seems to be working a little bit better because a lot of the data is so impacted after Apple rolled out those privacy changes. It's an excellent choice if your product solution fit needs an awareness phase first. And what that means is if you have a product with a known solution, people are more likely to seek out that solution through Google and places like that. And you have the opportunity to put the advert in front of someone in a really high intent placement in the moment that they're seeking or searching for what you do. But if you have an unknown solution or a new solution to a problem, it may need an awareness phase first. And expect the platform to be more expensive than normal right now, particularly because of those iOS changes as well. So, just in terms of getting started, regardless of platform, I typically recommend this getting started checklist where you're going to make sure your tracking is set up accurately from the start, even if you are a new account. Tracking is crucial. Tracking isn't necessarily very crucial in terms of measuring things. Well, yes, it is crucial for doing that, but the real learning and tracking is the platform getting to learn more about your audience and optimizing for a certain action that you want people to take. So, getting in front of people who are most likely going to purchase, or most likely going to subscribe, or most likely going to take the action that you want them to do. Without your tracking set up or your events triggering correctly, then you're not feeding that information back into the platform for it to learn. I find sometimes a lot of small businesses come to me and say, well, I can just sense the lift. I can just measure the lift because yesterday I wasn't running adverts. Now I am. And what's the difference? But the platform is never getting the opportunity to learn if the tracking isn't set up. So it's really important. Look at every potential data point you have to create audiences. Do you have an email list? Do you have an organic account that's doing well? Your traffic to your site? Do you have potential businesses that you can collaborate with because you can actually share audiences between ads manager accounts as well? And think about those audiences you want to exclude just as much as you want to include when you're bringing in that data. So people who've already purchased, you want to upload that for two reasons. You may want to block them from seeing an ad because they've already purchased, and maybe it's a product that people don't purchase typically frequently, like a camera or phone or something like that, for example. Um, but you also want to upload that to tell Facebook, find me more people like this, but also exclude them so they don't see this ad again after they've purchased. Think about that. Think about what you want to exclude because it's going to save you dollars on what you want to include. Think about your segmentation and focus on the lowest hanging fruit at this point, if you're early on in particular, and look at other industries for creative insights. So people love the idea of reverse engineering things, but if when you reverse engineer what your competitors do, potentially you were just doing the same as them or worse because you're probably not going to be able to implement it as well as they did anyway. Um, there's going to be nuances or reasons that they chose certain things that it may not be relevant to you. I always look at other industries for creative insight because your goal in an advert is to stand out and get attention. It's not necessarily about just mimicking what your competitors are doing. So, first of all, privacy first marketing is here. Reports so far indicating that there's a 4% uptake in terms of continuing to be tracked in the US. 12% is the average worldwide. What that means is that anyone who has updated their Apple device to iOS 14 or later now gets a prompt on their phone to say, allow app to track or not to track. So people have the option to opt out of Facebook. 4% seems to be the number in the US. This is from a few months ago, so this might be a little bit different now, but it's a very low percentage regardless, even if it's on the higher end, even if it was up as far as 20%. Essentially, that means for every 100 people who see that prompt, only a handful are continuing to opt in to be tracked, which means that the data is very skewed. So you need to start thinking about your business from a more holistic perspective. So you're looking at the bigger picture of what the ad lift is providing for your business. Device usage here is extremely important when you're looking at your adverts going forward. Competition has naturally increased on the Android side of things. So I've seen Android app campaigns become more expensive naturally because people are leaning into those a little bit more to try balance out the expense of running campaigns towards Apple devices at the moment. Lead generation and organic SEO, all of that is just more important than ever, arguably potentially more important than paid acquisition right now because it's so expensive in comparison to what it was even a few years ago. If you started your SEO strategy or your organic strategy, your leads gen strategy a few years back, you're in a much greater position potentially than starting that now. But you will have um, a more expensive campaign on Facebook and Instagram than you would have if you'd run this in 2019, for example. A great place to find what your main device traffic is currently. This will just give you, typically it's always the same. Typically I mostly see this screenshot in front of me where most of the traffic is coming from Apple. But if you're in Universal Analytics, you can go to audience, mobile and devices, and it will give you a list of the devices of the most frequent, sorry, not the most frequent, but the where the sessions for the date range you put in have come from, and you can make a estimate there in terms of how much of your data is going to be impacted. Facebook pixel tracking, so pixel actions like form submission, click to download, add to cart, purchase completion, they will all have less numbers reported as more people choose to opt out of being tracked. This means that the cost per action is going to be naturally higher on the platform because essentially some numbers are missing. So let's say, for example, 20, you notice that 20 people have purchased something on your website. Facebook is telling you that 12 of those came from their platform, but actually the other 8 did as well, but they couldn't track it. It might try to estimate some of that 8, or it may get that wrong. But there's going to be that gap in the data is going to be there. So you're going to naturally, even though it got 20 conversions, let's say for argument's sake, it's going to tell you in the platform that it only got 12, and the cost per 12 was a lot more expensive than the cost per 20, even though more came in. So they might be missing because they converted and could be, or maybe because they couldn't be targeted in the first place, or there may just be less conversions. It's a little bit of a gray area at the moment. Yes, you can structure in things like your UTM parameters and potentially use the conversions API instead of the Facebook pixel, which allow you to ping information from your server, which can be a little bit more accurate. But again, a big problem of the tracking being skewed, as I said earlier about tracking being so important, is that the targeting is being skewed as a default off of that as well. If you're setting up your tracking, I'd highly recommend checking out Google Tag Manager. Google Tag Manager is like a whole session. It's a whole course in of itself, to be honest. But just to take away the name of the tool and maybe start digging into learning about it a bit more, because it's a fantastic resource for tracking and getting your tracking set up. In terms of building out your data, so first of all, you have to ask yourself if you have data. If so, you need to collate as much of it as possible into the platform you want to test. In this instance, Facebook. So you're uploading over here all these things in the screenshot. I'll go into that in more detail in a second. But if you don't have data, you can look at tools like Phantom Buster that will help you scrape data to get started with. Phantom Buster is great if you're in the B2B space. Trust machine learning side of things too. So if you're really getting started from scratch, just I've run many campaigns recently where I've put nothing into the audience section and just let Facebook learn by itself and place the advert. It takes a little bit more time to balance out, but it's worthwhile. So this is a close-up of that screenshot that was on that screen there in terms of your audience sources. So you can create audiences based off your data in terms of your website, app activity, customer list, offline, video, lead form, instant experience shopping, all of these different things. This blue line along here indicates what is impacted by iOS 14 versus what is not impacted. So everything that is your source, so website, customer list, all of that data is impacted, but everything below the blue line here is not impacted and provides opportunity to grow essentially. So let's take, for example, a video campaign. And I ran this for a client a while back where we did, and I think it was 3.5, 4 minute video where they went through the story of how the product was made from start to finish, really slick video. And then we retargeted people who watched more than 75% of that video because we knew the data wasn't going to be impacted by iOS 14 because anything like a video view is fair game. It's on the platform. It's as soon as people navigate away from Facebook where the conflicts start to happen in terms of tracking and targeting effectively. These are the key campaign types that are impacted by the change. So your traffic, app installs, conversion, and catalog sales. These are all the campaigns that are most impacted. Conversions and catalog sales probably account for 95% of the ads I run on Facebook, regardless of this, because they're still the most effective. But I have started layering in video views or engagement a little bit just to help bolster the data that is now missing from the conversions and catalog sales if you want to do remarketing or things like that, because as soon as they hit the site, you can't get back in front of a lot of them. So I factor in some of these now, like video views. But that's just a decision you need to make depending on how impacted your ads have been. If you've been running them for the last few years and all of a sudden you're really seeing that decline, then you really need to start thinking, okay, how can I help lift the data or bolster it a little bit? And video views and engagement can be a great way to do that. Don't bother with traffic because it's never high value traffic regardless. Someone who stays on the platform and watches a huge amount of information about what you do is pretty high value as well. Domain verification then is a crucial part of getting your ads right, and that has changed. So before you never had to verify your domain to run an ads, but now in your business settings under brand safety, you have to click domains and you have to add your domain. If you don't have your domain verified, you will automatically be excluded from showing your adverts to people on Apple devices with iOS 14 or later. And as we all know, Apple devices typically are higher value customers, and if they're more likely to have the recent iOS or have updated that iOS, they're more likely using a recent device as well. For each domain then that you verify, you will be limited to 8 events that can be tracked, and that domain must be verified to those 8 events. So Facebook will automatically assign the events they believe are relevant to your business. Don't let it do that. Go in and make sure that is correct. But iOS 14 users who opt out of data tracking will now only be logged for one event after they click on a Facebook ad, if any. And users who complete a predetermined conversion event on the first ad click will be logged. So what that essentially means is that you have 8 events that you're going to place in order of priority for your business. A very simple way to think about this might be view page, add to cart, initiate checkout, completed payment, purchased. Something to that effect, where the completed payment or purchase is the highest priority and viewing the page is the least priority. You don't really care about the data coming in potentially on the view page, but you do about the purchase. So even if the user takes all of those actions, potentially only one of those will be logged, and you want it to be the highest value or the most important one for your business, which in this instance is going to be the complete payment or purchase. So this is what that event prioritization looks like. So here you can see this is what I had set up for growthuniversity.io. Our legacy website now is we've moved to velocity growth, but our highest priority was any membership type, followed by a webinar sign up, because these were the 2 campaign types I was running most frequently. And I didn't want to optimize for a yearly membership over monthly or monthly over yearly in any instance, because sometimes we would fluctuate between getting more yearlies and more monthlies, and it was hard to decipher which was going to be the highest priority because we were very early stage. But any membership type included both of them. So that's why I opted for that being the highest priority. So you can think about it a little bit like that, where potentially if you want 2, squeeze them into 1 if you are really optimizing, but and factor them out afterwards then. So these this is a very non-scientific experiment, I would describe it as, but this is an example of how that tracking and targeting is skewed. So when I opted in, and then I opted out of seeing tracked ads, tracked or targeted ads, we'll say, on Facebook and Instagram. So over here on the left, you can see when I'm opted in, I see ads from HubSpot, LinkedIn, AdWorld Conference. All makes sense. I'm a marketer. Those ads you'd expect me to see. Over here on the right, a complete contrast. This is what I started seeing. The top left ad here was in, I think it's in Dutch. I couldn't make it out. This one here, lift drooping eyelids in just 3 minutes, and to join the Irish Defence Forces. So these are ads that I would have no interest in, but started seeing once I opted out of tracking. So you can still do targeting based on demographic and psychographic based targeting. So you can still put in age, gender, some demographics, interest, and behavior data in here, and you can target based on that. However, it is not a perfect science anymore. It never really was, but I'd recommend if you were going to lean in towards this, that I would leave it empty and allow Facebook to figure it out rather than preempting it. You can also still do your geo targeting. So you can target people in a very specific location. So you can drop a pin and then you can use exclusion points to hone in on a building or a certain location if you really want to make it small. This is great if you want to target people who are attending a conference, an event, car show, wedding fair, things like that. Geo targeting is great for, or if you just went and crushed a really high value meeting and you want them to start seeing testimonials while they're making a decision, for example. You can also collaborate and share audiences. And this is a feature that I don't think a lot of people use that I think is actually really valuable. So for a while I was working with both a chef and a fitness person who did online classes. They weren't directly competing with each other, but their audiences were a perfect match for each other. So what we did was share their audiences back and forth. This audience sharing is encrypted. So if you share an email list with someone, for example, they don't get the list of emails. They just get the option to select that audience in their drop down to target. So it's a great way to collaborate. If you're using influencer marketing or intend to use influencer marketing, I always try to write this into the contract if possible, that they will have to share the audience of people who engaged with their post, so that you can use it again afterwards. Again, audiences and campaign structures are a huge part of that picture. So earlier I highlighted which of the campaigns are most impacted by iOS 14 changes, but again, you need to think about the level of intent from these audiences as well when you're setting up a campaign. So typically your awareness is your cold, low intent audience, warmer, medium intent audience, and hot audiences over here on the right. The reason I describe these as low, medium, and high intent is because I think people have a misconception potentially that the higher the volume of traffic to the website, the higher the volume of conversions, or the higher volume of awareness, the higher volume of traffic, and the higher volume of conversions. It doesn't necessarily work like that on Facebook. The platform is optimizing for user behavior. So if I'm scrolling through Facebook and I never have ever bought something through Facebook, but I like people's posts, I'm more likely to see an engagement ad. It's working off my user behavior more so than like this process of awareness, consideration, and conversion. Um, so to that note, that's why typically, even for I would say 95% of the campaigns, if not more, are all conversion focused campaigns. Don't really waste budget on low and medium intent because I'm also conscious of the user behavior element to it rather than the actual awareness and consideration potentially. Also consider your placements really carefully. So Facebook's marketing experts will ring you and tell you to use automatic placements, but I still think there's a strong argument to place your adverts manually. Mostly because Facebook newsfeed and Instagram feeds still get the highest return on ad spend consistently. People with bigger budgets, I'll play with stories and reels to layer in some of that. But some placements just annoy people. I mean, if someone's watching a video on Facebook, you don't want to be the interruption in the middle. You don't want to be the irritating ad in the in-stream placement. And apps and sites, that's just off-site. That's not even on Facebook. I turn this on if someone is advertising an app, but not in other instances. In article again, people are just trying to read the article. Think about what people are doing in the instances of the placement, and that can lend to a better return on ad spend and better optimization for the ads. Here are some resources. If you are planning on building out creatives for the platform as well, Placeit is a fantastic resource if you are in drop shipping or clothing or anything like that and you want to make mock-ups. But it also has a nice video editing tool, which is pretty good. Unsplash is my favorite resource for free stock photos. Pexels, my favorite for free video content. Promo.com is just a fantastic resource to check out in terms of creating your first ads or your first few ads. Philomore is my go-to video editing tool. Envato Elements is a fantastic subscription service that actually encapsulates everything. It has photos, music, sound effects, web templates, everything in the stock world that you could imagine that you would require for an online presence is in Envato Elements. I just think they've reduced their. I'm not sponsored by them. I just really like them, but I think they've actually reduced their subscription at the moment. I think it might be down to like 14 euro, so maybe like 15, $16 or something. It's a really good subscription. Veed and Capwing then are fantastic tools for little things like editing video down, sub automatically getting it subtitled, putting little progress bars in, just making your videos just that little bit slicker. V.io and Capwing are two great resources for that. And here are some examples of high performing creatives. So over here on the left, that 5 gold stars followed by a testimonial has always worked pretty well. Every time I've split tested, it's come out on top or second. So it works pretty well. 3 gold stars and no gold stars don't perform as well. For some reason, people love the 5 gold stars. So test it with that. The middle graphic here, again, this is just an example where if you need to feed a lot of information to the user and you know you only have 3 to 5 seconds to grab that attention, we just did a split video here so that we were able to tell the user all in one go that it was fine if you were advanced or a beginner or if you wanted to work out at home. And there was lots of recipes. So we just forced the information all in one go. And over here on the right, you can see that this is a landscape video. This is actually the video I was referencing earlier that was quite long, went through the process of making the product very carefully. That was used for the retargeting side of things. But again, just that it doesn't necessarily always need to be a square or longer things. If it's a high quality, very well made video and you're looking to seek intent from your users, um, the the old, I don't want to say the old school, it's not old school, but like the traditional videos can still work quite well. You also need to be thinking about what's resonating with your audience in terms of content. So split testing that copy, are you changing your creative? Small changes can lead to some big impacts in many cases. Small changes can also lead to very minimal impacts in lots of cases too. But big changes can be difficult to track because you might change everything and not figure out what actually made the difference. Small changes and tweaking like your messaging, then tweaking the creative, and then tweaking maybe the audience. You can start figuring out what was causing some problems or what is going to progressively make things better. But this split test we completed where we changed the word private chef to just chef. This was a service like Uber Eats or something like that, where food was delivered to your door, but in this instance a chef was delivered to your door and they would cook in your kitchen. But what we realized was, well, the hypothesis was that the term private chef made it sound too expensive, even though it was to be positioned as an affordable service. So when we switched to just the word chef, the click-through rate started to increase from 3 to about 11%, because that piqued curiosity a little bit more than the private chef, where I believe anyway, what was happening was people saw the term private chef and went, potentially not for me. You can also find your competitor ads inside in Facebook ads library. And what I would do if you're researching your competitor ads is do so on a rolling basis over a few months or over a period of time, so that you can reflect on the ads that are continuously there versus ads that have stopped running, because ads that have been running there longer potentially have been working better for them than not. But also, again, use this tool to take a look at what other companies are doing in other industries. Get some inspiration from outside the box there as well, is always important. Key takeaways: build your data out as much as possible. Ensure to align your campaigns with your goals. So if you want conversions, don't be clicking on that traffic button for that audience and what level of intent you're seeking from the audience. Always be testing your creatives against your audience there as well. As always, all you're ever trying to do with adverts, regardless of the platform, is to just get the right people at the right place at the right time with the message. So people don't necessarily hate adverts, they just hate irrelevant interruptions, which is why I often wonder if people are going to start opting back in a little bit to tracking, because as you could see by my micro experiment, the ads are pretty irrelevant to those who've opted out as well at the moment. So thanks everyone. This is my email address if anyone needs to reach out, if anyone has any questions. And we've gone live with our new site, velocitygrowth.com, where you can sign up free. And we have hundreds of short form videos and standard operating procedures, how-to guides on how to do tons of marketing stuff. So you can sign up free and check those out as well.